Hello, everyone, and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one stop shop for all things Fulham. And we're back to discuss the disappointing cup exit last night at Preston. And we'll also take a look forward to the game against Newcastle at the weekend. So, as you'll hear, it's David Crave standing in from Jack again today. So, I must have passed the audition, hosting once again. And I'm joined today by the pod daddy himself. It's Elton. How are you, Elton?
I've been called some things in my time. Um, yeah, I'll accept that. I'm well, mate. I'm very well. No, I wasn't overly depressed with what I saw last night and bits and pieces. Look, outcome could have been better, but I'm focused on the big prize here, and I think Marco is as well secretly.
Okay, that's interesting. When it'll be good to run through the game. There's so much to talk about in this game today, so I'm really looking forward to it. We've also got coming, making his return and fighting off a really bad dose of man flu. It's our very own Putney perspective, Skibby. So how you feeling, Skibby?
I'm feeling better. But
Good.
no, it's good to be back and behind a mic and not just sort of coughing on every bloody word. But I'm actually disappointed a little bit, Dave. I was hoping you'd do a nice Jack impression to see if anyone could realise if that Jack wasn't with us today. Just be like, joined by Dad. How's it going?
My Aussie accent would most certainly offend. So I thought I would.
Even better.
I, Good eye, everybody. No, I'll leave that to Jack.
That's
so
actually very interesting. It's interesting that you guys think Jack has an Australian accent because most Australians pick him out as an Englishman, absolutely. And
Oh,
Really?
really?
uh, oh yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
it definitely
The
does.
truth, the truth is probably somewhere in between,
Mm.
Yeah,
as
definitely.
as
Yeah.
as happens when you live in a few different places. But anyway,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
No,
Carry
it's
on, Dave.
okay. Well, I was just going to say before we start, anyone that's following on the live stream, just fire over your questions and Elton will flag them up to us. We'll do our best to answer them if we haven't moved on to the next subject. And as always, we have to talk about our Discord channel because I was actually using it last night and Skibby was on there too. We were talking during the game about things that had happened. It helped us all get through the penalty shootout, which just felt like it was going to go on forever. I just thought it was fantastic last night. So many people engaging, so many points of view, and I've really advised everyone to log in and become part of it. I'd also advise you to subscribe to our socials and keep up to date with all the content that we're releasing weekly. And yeah, don't miss a thing. So, as I was saying, so much to get into about last night, but I guess we should probably start with the team lineup. I think a lot of people had kind of predicted it would be the fringe players who started the game, but I'd be really interested to see how you felt about that. Let's start with Skibby. What was your feelings when you saw the team?
I think I predicted about 10 out of the 11. I think I was a bit optimistic. I wanted to see Marshall Godot instead of Wilson, just because I think Wilson's had a fair crack at sort of Premier League off the bench. I wanted to see Godot sort of given a bit of a start, given a free rein, and just see what he could do. But yeah, like you say, no complaints, no surprises. Kearney and Reed for me are always going to be, leaders in the dressing room. We don't want to piss them off. They're not going to be involved in many Premier League games, therefore the cup is kind of their competition. So I know there was calls for King to come in, but I think you'd piss them both off if you started to
Mm.
play a 17-year-old over your club captain and probably your vice captain as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, still a very strong side. I think we've talked about this in the Birmingham game in the previous round that that team could potentially do a job. In higher championship, very much relegation favourites, I guess, in the Premier League, but still a very strong squad where you had Castagna playing, Diop, Cuenca, sort of Sessegnon. That back line is probably like a lower Premier League back line, but it is still Premier League quality there. So I think we all had that kind of optimism going into this game of this team should have enough about them to take the game to Preston, control the game, and you know get our names into the hat for the next round.
Mm.
But as we found out, but not to be. But hey, a decent lineup, as it were.
Yeah, decent lineup. Only one real change from the first game that we had at Birmingham, which was obviously Jay Stansfield coming out and Reece Nelson coming in. Elton, what were your thoughts when you saw the lineup?
Yeah, not many surprises at all for me. I think the really obvious one was going to be giving our number 9 another opportunity to fire, and I think there's probably a whole podcast in that topic. Um, I I wasn't expecting to see Anderson. I think he's proved he doesn't need any more time and preparation. Um, yeah, it was question mark as to whether Berger would start, and I'm glad he did. Um, surprises? No, I don't think there were many other surprises really for me.
Yeah.
Maybe the only surprise is that it went to penalties, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's true, particularly how the game kind of panned out. It was an interesting first half, I thought. It was end to end at times. You know, they were getting in behind. I think we had the majority of the possession, but they looked a real danger on the break, particularly Josh Bowler, who just seems to turn into Lionel Messi whenever he plays against Fulham. So he gave Cesc a difficult time in the first half going forward. And we'll talk more about Cesc, I think, in his second half display. But just wanted to get your thoughts, Skippy, on how that first half panned out. And in particular, I think, you know, the goal and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the first half went exactly how I expected. We were on the front foot. We were getting into good spaces. We had chances. I think Harrison Reed probably, from memory, had the best chance. You know, cross from the left, a great pullback. He was on his own on the penalty spot. You almost wanted to think if that was Kearney, Wilson, someone with a bit more composure about them, a bit more finesse, that was going to be a goal. But unfortunately, Harrison Reed is one of those players where, you know, he scored, I think, is it one Premier League game? And there's a reason for that, which kind of shows, unfortunately. Love Harrison Reed, don't get me wrong, but it's just that feeling I have around him. But I mean, yeah, like you say, Bowler had Cesc kind of on the back foot, and Cesc did show his, I guess, what's the word, his vulnerabilities in defending. That, you know, he's not great one-on-one, gets turned inside out. You want a player like Tete or Castagna who can stop the cross. And unfortunately, he didn't stop the cross, and, you know, we paid the price. It's all a bit messy, the goal, for me. I think even sort of stemming from, they give the ball away. Diop, I think it cannons off one of their midfielders. Diop steps up, tries to play a pass through to, I think it was Kearney, and it takes a deflection off the defender and then falls to Preston player, who then gets it out wide. Bowler has Cesc on toast, gets a ball in, and then you just want to think, Berger, you need to get a bit more oomph on that clearance, and he just sort of lightly touches it to the edge of the area, and it's just one of those where he hits it very cleanly. It goes into the bottom corner. Keeper's got no chance. I mean, for me, 9 times out of 10, that goes either straight at the keeper, straight at the defender, or over the bar wide. But he just hits it dead true, straight in that bottom corner, and there's not much you can do about it. But I mean, Fulham, we had all of a good thing about us was just the attacking intent, and I think Nelson was key to that. And I really liked Nelson. I think I saw some comments which was, you know, he just dribbles into nowhere. But for me, there wasn't a lot happening in front of him that he was having to, you know, get hold of the ball, just get at his man, get past him. And he was cutting inside and doing all the right things. But unfortunately, the shots just weren't coming off. And I think Preston, to their credit, they defended well. There was, I think, a shot for Nelson, Sessegnon, I think Wilson had one as well, where they were just throwing their bodies in front of it. They were defending for their lives, and you know what? We go in at 1-0 at half time, and it's just one of those things. Almost like a freak goal, I want to say. But, you know, Fulham were in control. Probably very unlucky to go in at 1-0 down. I think 0-0 or even in the lead would have been fair. But, hey, you don't take your chances, you're not going to score. So going in at 1-0 down wasn't the best, but hey-ho.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It was a game that, the first half felt very much like Fulham were the aggressors, but Preston looking a real threat on the break. They also had that other opportunity, didn't they, when Bender actually pulled off a
Oh, great
fantastic
save.
save. Yeah. Elton, your thoughts on the first half showing?
Well, a lot of interesting points that you sort of pulled up there, Skibby. On Nelson, he's exciting, isn't he? Every time he comes out, he shows he's got something, and there's a huge amount of promise there. It's a shame he's not ours, but I did hear that there's some workings in the background to try and convert that into a permanent deal. Don't know if that's true or not, or if
What an exclusive.
That's so
yeah,
Craven exclusive, everybody.
yeah. I didn't even make it up. I actually did genuinely read it. Um, in terms of a response or a kind of a response to the criticism of the fact that he dribbles into nowhere, I'm not having that. I actually think that he runs very directly, and I like the fact that he's always heading for the box, and you can't have too much of that because he's very dangerous. He's tricky, and if you take him on and get it wrong, you know, there's a big problem for defenders. So I'm not sure that's entirely fair. I think he does actually have shots. He's got pretty quick feet as well. I think I think he's a overall and genuine threat, and I think that's pretty harsh and incredibly picky. I'm not sure why someone would be so critical of him in his style when he's doing something that very few other players at Fulham in this squad are doing right now. What's the problem? In terms of unpacking that goal, that first one that went in, I was enjoying the pictures you were painting, Skippy. I was wondering how far you were going to go back actually, because you were actually painting the whole build up kind of longer than I could remember it.
The boys
I
came
was
out of
just
the tunnel. The ref blew for kickoff.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. I was really only going to talk about Bender's kind of less than average, slightly underwhelming clearance. I mean, he actually did try to put his foot through that. It just didn't come off. He sort of scuffed it. I think the idea was right. So it wasn't like he was two-minded about it. I think the idea was right. He just didn't really pull it off, and it went straight to the man in a dangerous position, who, as you said, executed really well. So it's hard to have any complaints. The other thing I think is there's a bit of a crowd out there giving Bend a pretty hard time, and I think it's a bit unwarranted. I think he made one very, very good save off a close range header. Really good reactions. I think in general he did okay. I know Skippy had some comments which I'm sure he'll make about his performance on the penalties, but I thought he was pretty good. And as I said to you guys on the internal chat, I really wouldn't be anxious if he had to turn up and put the gloves on in a Premier League game for us. Um, as Jack mentioned over a coffee earlier today, probably happier if it was a Man City game that we could throw anyway, and probably not feel like we were under too much pressure to get a result. But look, in general, we absolutely dominated that first half, and I think the overwhelming problem we've got and have had for a little while really is that whether it's our first team on a Saturday or our second team, which was last night, let's be fair, a good second team, Premier League quality, lower half Premier League quality, you'd have to say. But what we're really, really missing is just like a firecracker, um, dangerous striker who doesn't need perfect service and things teed up for him, who can just go and get the ball from a number of different circumstances and create absolute mayhem and just have a lot of shots on target, some of which have to just come off. We just don't have that, and I'm not in the camp of baying for Mooney's blood at all. But you know, if you have that much possession and that much dominance, there has to be more goals going in the back of the net. Sure, we could share that around and look for responsibility all around the forwards, but you know, we at Premier League level versus a Championship side, we should be, with that level of dominance, we should be 3 goals ahead at halftime.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from that, and I think it's kind of been the story of our season so far, is that we haven't kind of scored goals when we've been on top, when we've been creating chances. Sorry, we can put that. Oh, am I back? Look like we got a little bit cut off there. Yeah, it looks like we haven't been scoring goals when we've been on top in games, or enough goals when we've been on top in games, and that's a mixture. I think it's down to, you know, striker being a little bit out of form, and a little bit underconfident, and I think it's a little bit down to just moves kind of breaking down, the final ball breaking down at the last moment, which has been a bit disappointing, and I think everyone's starting to feel that frustration. I think that was very evident in the second half, where there was ample crosses going into that box, and just no one getting on the end of them. I mean, you wouldn't say that the goalkeeper had lots of good, you know, made lots of good saves in that half. It was just we weren't getting on the end of the final ball despite all of our attacking intent. Is that how you saw it, Skibby?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right on the money. The crosses that Sess in particular was getting into the box were absolute class. Like first time volleys across the 6-yard box. Keeper was in no man's land. You just wanted someone just to get a toe on it. And I think it would be really unfair for me to blame the striker in that instance, because Muniz was in and about the box. Most of the time he even had 2 men on him, if I'm honest. And the way that we used to play, I would say last season, is that we would have, you know, a centre attack in mid and potentially a number 8 crash in the box. So, you know, Pereira was always in and around, and you know, Lukic in the whenever he played with Polina would be in and around the box just to sort of get on the end of something, which we saw against Spurs. And last night I was seeing that, you know, Tom Kearney and Reed were not really on the ball, or even had the legs to get into the box. That we were kind of pushing Nelson more centrally, so Sessegnon could overlap. Nelson would then be a bit more centrally, but he's a winger, so he would be sort of left side of the centre, if that makes sense. So we just weren't getting bodies in the box, and I think that's something that we are potentially going to see even with the normal starting lineup that we have in the Premier League. So Smith Rowe, we know that he loves to sort of sit on the wing, cut in a little bit. So I know that we saw in pre-season that he was being that poacher, but we need to have that. Basically, just get bodies in the box. That's all I'm asking for. If you're asking questions of defence with a really nice ball in, you just want someone just to make that run, get something on it, get a toe on it. Even if you can get a toe on it, it then come off a defender, go in. You know, you causes carnage. But if you're not committing those bodies forward, which I don't think we did until, you know, Smith Rowe and Iwobi, and I think even Lukic came on, that we should start to see some carnage against Preston. But, you know, I thought it was quite easy for them just to let it run across. And I won't blame Muniz. Like I said, he had 2 men on him most of the time. I mean, yeah, you could say they're Championship defenders, but, you know, as we know, Championship defenders are big brutes, so they're gonna give him a tough time. So, but like you say, we got the balls into the box. Muniz had chances. There was I think a header from after Harrison Reed hit the bar.
Yeah,
great save. It just is what it is. Just not falling for him, but. I think for me, it's those players around Muniz need to really help him out, crash the box, as I say, and try and make something happen. But I didn't really see that from the midfield of Reed and Kearney that we had sort of for about 60 minutes of that game.
Yeah, and the one time that we managed to get on the end of something, it was Nelson had actually come inside and crashed the box just as you were describing. So if we'd have seen a bit more of that last night, and then we scored, funny enough. So I think if we'd have seen a bit more of that last night. Yeah, look, there's been a lot of talk following the game about, certain players and, who really kind of put pressure on the manager now for a first team appearance. And a lot of people are kind of calling out Mooney, saying, we need a striker. He's not good enough. For me, I as I said on X last night, I still back Mooney's. I still think Mooney's, he's off form, clearly. He's a little underconfident. But I still respect his hold-up play when he's on the pitch. I think he does a really good job of flicking the ball on and bringing others into play. And I really, truly believe that once he gets a goal, he'll be off and running. But at the moment, it's just not falling his way. And I thought it was unfair to kind of put all the blame on him last night. I thought, as Skibby said, others could have helped by getting into the box and getting on the end of crosses. Elton, your thoughts on the second half and in particular the goal? Obviously, Reece Nelson's first for the club. You were talking about him earlier. It's pleasing to see, a winger that we've just brought in get on the score sheet so early.
Yeah, and also pleasing to see Cess getting an assist, and that's a decent reward for, as Skippy mentioned, a number of good crosses coming in, and he did okay going forward. His defensive work is probably a different issue and another subject, but no, look, it was a good set of reflexes and reactions, I suppose, for the goal. I I'm actually, yeah. Look, I still think we should have got more out of it. We should never have ended up in that position of having to go to penalties. But if I can just sort of step sideways here, Steve Reynolds, following along on the live stream, actually brought up something which I thought is an interesting point. And he says, I'll read it out. He says, should we not play reverse tactics and start with the top 8 players and try and get the goals and then look to taking them off? And I think it's an interesting question. Obviously, it's a question of, do we want to go on a cup run and chase some silverware, or are we using the cup game for slightly different purposes, or is it a mix of both? And I think we started out the conversation saying that both Tom Kearney and Harrison Reed would probably create mayhem if they weren't started and given certain opportunities to play. And I'm like anyone else. I'd love to go on a cup run. We did pretty well in this very competition last year, right? We progressed very, very well. But it kind of shines another light on the challenges that Silver's having. 5 weeks in, 6 weeks into the campaign, and he's still trying things, trying to work out something in the midfield, trying to give players, new signings, a chance to get minutes, get match fit. And it's all kind of a bit late, really, for a Premier League elite level competition. So I'm just wondering, he'd never admit to having no ambition in a cup, but it felt to me like he picked a second 11 and sort of early in the competition with a bit of a hit and hope that we should knock these guys over with our quality second 11. And I don't think he had any intention of overworking some of the better players just in order to get a couple of goals ahead, only to bench them and then, progressively finish the game with a second 11 protecting a lead. I don't think that was his intention in any way, shape, or form. And partly because he's got other objectives. His Saturday objective has to be to try and work out. Well, I don't think he solved many problems last night in defensive midfield, but he is surely reluctant to overwork some of the key players, and he doesn't have the luxury. He hasn't had the time. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it's less about overworking the first 11 and more about getting minutes to the the fringe players and giving them time on the pitch to stake their claim. And actually, it's always a bit of a gamble when you make so many changes, and we've seen that over the last 2 seasons. 2 seasons ago, we made 11 changes and we lost to Crawley in the first round. last season, it worked. We managed to get through a couple of games against championship teams, and then we started introducing the first teamers. So it's a gamble. Silva's backed his second 11 to get the result. You know, I think it was the right move, although, of course, in hindsight, you could argue we're out of the competition. But I think on another day, you know, the amount of chances we had last night, we should have done enough to get through. Preston offered nothing in the second half for me, and unfortunately, it went to penalties, and we all know what happened. Skibby, what did you think?
No, you're spot on, and I think there's also an element of sort of dressing room man management that, you know, Kearney, Harrison Reed, they wouldn't stick around if they weren't going to play. So to prevent them from leaving the club, and then us having to find more fringe players, you'd have to promise them that, you know, Carabao Cup, you're in, don't worry about it, or up to certain round, okay? So to sort of please those kind of players, that, you know, that is important for them to come in, and more importantly, give people like Lukic and Treyas, who have played in the Premier League, give them a bit of a breather. But I mean, look, Preston North End sitting 23rd in the Championship shouldn't have been a problem for people of the team that we put out. So I see what Steve is saying in terms of, you know, we could just go out with the same 11 and, you know, make the changes. But Marco's got a squad. He's got to use that squad. He's going to trust that squad. And he put trust in them last night. And I think they were relatively unlucky. I mean, we hit the bar. Keeper made some saves. And like I said, they defended really well. Once you bring in Smith Rowe and Iwobi with, I think, was it around 30 minutes left? So if you look at our front four, it was Nelson, Smith Rowe, Iwobi, Muniz. That's enough firepower to bring down most, I would say, even Premier League teams. You'd be able to ruffle some feathers and get a goal. So I don't think there was any problem in the squad selection. I think it was just a problem with the actual performance on the night and not being as clinical as they can be. But look, we got the goal. Nelson, great that he's got up and running. I mean, realistically, we huffed and we puffed, and I don't really remember a real clear chance after that, if I'm honest. We brought it, and then we started to bring in players who could take penalties, rather than, you know, actually starting to sort of look to win the game. So I think, you know, Raul Jimenez came on, and Lukic, just to really sort of be more there for the penalty taking, which rather than winning the game. Because at that point, we had enough firepower on the pitch. It didn't work out, and then we had to go to plan C, which was penalties. And I mean, given the score on the penalties, we made some good choices there, because they all, apart from one, scored. So what can you do? But I think it's just one of those things in the Cup that these results happen. They haven't happened to us in a while, but here it is.
Well, interesting also why you say that man management is important, and in our kind of dynamic, it really, really is. But if you lose early doors, you're actually taking away a cup competition where those fringe players can no longer play.
And
So
they
it's
only
a
have
pretty
themselves to blame.
fine. Yeah, well, maybe you got to sprinkle in a bit more talent a bit earlier on, is the point I'm making, to ensure that we do stay in the competition so they can have more minutes. But they've got to be able to do it.
There.
Yeah, no, I agree. You have to say it's an underperformance for that particular lineup against a championship team really struggling at the moment. So I actually think they, certainly in the first half, I actually think they defended very well, and, you know, blocked a number of challenges that could easily have, or opportunities that could easily have resulted in goals or something more threatening than it ended up being. But yeah, interesting.
I think, you know, we mentioned it earlier about Sessegnon's kind of troubles defending 1-1 in the first half, but I think it'd be remiss not to mention the threat that he was and the threat that he posed in the second half last night. I thought he was excellent, just constantly causing them problems down the left, getting balls in, dangerous crosses in. I mean, it said to me very much so that this is a left winger. You know, it's not a left back. I hope the club start to realise that, because I just really quite excited by his performance last night, and it was so much better than what I saw at Birmingham. So wanted to call, and highlight that. We also talked about Reece Nelson, again, another exciting performance last night. Great at carrying the ball, just seemed to stick to his foot all night long. So again, there was positives there, but I think it's just so disappointing how we weren't able to, as we said at the start, take advantage of all the opportunities that we had. And then, of course, we were met with the penalty shootout. And my word, I mean, I've never seen a penalty shootout go round. I know it's happened, but I've never seen it. And it just felt like it was going to go on forever. I mean, stunning penalties, as Skibby mentioned. What were your thoughts, Elton, when obviously disappointment, but our approach to the penalties was the right one, do you think?
Oh, I think they were flawless until it wasn't, But it is one of those situations when you get that deep into it, something's going to give, and you're going to be pretty unlucky at that point. I thought, geez, Jimenez can take a penalty, can't he? He's pretty,
Wow.
He's pretty cool. And a couple of guys surprised me. I think Lukic, Berger. I thought both of those guys, it's not out and out strikers, took a pretty good penalty. A number of people, even Bender's penalties were pretty good, frankly.
Top corner.
Let's not miss out Issa Diop's penalty either. Well, that was a banger.
I loved it.
Yeah,
that was the most
absolutely.
Brexit penalty technique ever. Just Julian Dix just hit it hard and true, and it will go in. Like, if the keeper got in the way of that, he would have carried on into the net, I think.
Yeah. No, it was disappointing, wasn't it?
Entertaining for sure. But I think if you're relying on having to score, 16 penalties and beat the other guy, you've left it too late.
You've left it too late. And it was interesting in that when we were talking in the Discord channel while the game was going on, there was a few comments that the penalty spot starting to look a bit, messed up as we're getting later on. And it did make me wonder when Castagna took his, if that might have been, part of the reason why he ballooned it over. But yeah, no fault on Castagna. He's as always, he's so reliable, and unfortunately, someone's got to miss. So there we go.
The only thing I call out is Bender's starting position. So I'm not a goalkeeper coach. I'm not a goalkeeper by trade, but I know the logic of goalkeepers in general is to narrow the angle for players to score, whether it be a penalty, whether it be 1-on-1. Narrow the angle, give them less things to aim at. But he was starting about a yard inside his own goal, which meant that if he leapt forward, then he was still kind of on the line. Whereas it's almost like, in my head, you've got to be 1 foot on the line and push off from the line on the way that you're going to go. So there was points where I was just thinking, he's not getting anywhere near these. And I don't know if this is just his technique, a goalkeeping coach thing that we've got, but I even saw a comment of Steve Reynolds, why didn't we bring Leno on for the penalties? Because Leno doesn't save penalties either. But that's just another thing. I think, was it Leno's only... Has he actually saved one yet? Because I know it was something really similar, that it was like, he's either not saved a penalty or he's only saved one in his entire Fulham career. But, yeah, there was just something really off about the way that he would start the penalties, and you just didn't feel confident that he was going to save one. I mean, the one that he did save was a piss-poor penalty that was sort of down the middle just to his left. But
kind of hit his knee, didn't it?
I think so, yeah. And it was just other penalties. He just didn't get anywhere near them. And I mean, that was only a minor criticism that I had, which is, what are you doing? But unless that's, like I said, unless that's what the coaches have been working on and that's what his technique is, I'm happy for him to prove me wrong. But yeah, it was a bit weird to watch.
Yeah. Okay, so should we switch attention, look forward to the weekend? We've got a massive game at home to Newcastle. And I personally think this is, quite an important game, because our run after this, I think, is tricky. After Newcastle at home on Saturday, we go to Nottingham Forest away, which I think, we lost there last year, and I think they've improved. And then we have City away and Villa at home. So this home game here feels like an opportunity to give ourselves some breathing space, and we need things to click. I mean, what are we expecting from? Are we expecting any changes on Saturday, Elton? Or I'm not sure anyone really did enough last night. But what are your thoughts?
I can't. Well, the question might be, because in my head, there's the jury's well and truly out still around, who our 6 and 8 pair are, and the question might be whether Berger's done anything or enough to suggest that he partners with Lukic, and maybe Pereira either goes to the bench or, you know, is positioned somewhere near the 10, just behind the 10, alongside Smith. I don't know what Marco's thinking. I do know that he's I think he's fairly conventional in his approach, so I don't think he's going to pull out something crazy. But I do wonder where. I mean, if Berger's got to feature in the starting lineup eventually. It has to be the plan. We paid a
Yeah.
lot of money for him. We didn't pay that money to have him on the bench. So is it Lukic? Or Lukic is making a much better argument than Pereira for being selected in midfield at the moment. However, kind of incomplete that puzzle still looks, because just the fact that he's playing well doesn't mean the pairing is going to work. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if Burgess starts on the weekend.
Mhm.
I cannot see Adama being dropped, and him not travelling last night almost confirms that he's going to play on Saturday. Surely Nelson starts. Surely Nelson starts on the
Okay.
left.
In
I,
place of
I think
Iwobi.
I think he displaces Iwobi.
Okay. Interesting. See, I again, I'm going to predict an unchanged lineup. I got it wrong last week. There was a big surprise in there, not with Anderson, but with obviously Muniz being rested for Raul Jimenez. But I feel like he might stick with the same team and use Nelson as an impact player. And only reason I think Berger may not come in just yet is just from his post-game comments last night, which he just kind of said, we're glad he got another 90 minutes on his step towards, starting a game in the Premier League. And it just suggested to me that
I didn't see
he's
that.
maybe not quite there yet. Skibby, do you think there'll be any changes?
I don't think there'll be any big changes. I think he'll keep Iwobi, like you say, Nelson as a impact, but could definitely make a statement if he comes off the bench and plays as well as he did in the last two games. I think there's an interesting one that I want to be clear that we're still in transition. We're still trying to work out how we fill a gap like Polina. And I like the idea that what Marco is going with, but I think it's going to take time to complete, which is, Andreas in that number 8 really allows us to open up attacking, really, in an attacking sense. That when we've got the ball and we're going forward, that almost Smith Rowe loves to take his position on the left-hand side, which we talked about. So you almost have a flat four that like Man City play with. So you've kind of got, I think Man City have, the two wingers, and then they've got De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva in the middle behind Haaland. And I think what we're trying to do is something similar, that, we've got Iwobi, Adama, and then you've kind of got Smith Rowe and Pereira behind Muniz or Raul, whoever it be. And then you've kind of got Lukic sitting to mop up anything that comes back at us. And I think if Andreas gets a bit sharper, I mean, I've seen the sloppiness, but I have also seen the good that we can do in those positions, which is if he picks up the ball, looks for Smith Rowe, looks out wide, and actually uses it a bit better than he has done in the last couple of games, then I think that is a tactic that is worth sort of investing in, and I think that is what Marco's trying to achieve. But it's just the fact that Andreas hasn't particularly been as quick on the ball. His decision making's been off. We saw it from the get go at Manchester United, that if he could just pick up the pace a little bit and get that ball out of his feet a bit earlier, and we can move into that position, then we might actually be onto something. And the thing that's holding me back here is that we talked about Berger being the number 6, but can I see Lukic be that number 8 that molds into a number 10? I'm not so sure. We saw him as that number 8 partnering Polina, and it just didn't work. And I think a lot of people are going to call, and this is something which I've been love reading. You could tell you can't see me, but you can probably tell by my voice. But I absolutely love reading all the scapegoating that's going on. That Andreas isn't good enough, Muniz isn't good enough, and we're 3 games in, 4 games in. Like, Jesus Christ, guys, we've literally lost one massive puzzle piece of the team in Polina, and it's gonna take time. We've not done a like for like change, and we're not gonna fill a Polina like for like with Berger. It just doesn't work. Especially the fact that he didn't have a preseason doesn't help. But anyway, we are changing the way that we're playing. We are trying to fill that gap with a mentality and a philosophy rather than actual skill set, and that's going to take time. And I think, the sooner we realise that we're in that transition, whether we actually see a difference. I mean, we're going to have to see some kind of improvement against Newcastle, because if I don't think Andreas is cemented in that position. If he drops another sort of 3 or 4 passes which he doesn't make because of his lack of indecision and things like that, then yes, then we're going to start seeing problems. But if we're starting to see gradual increase in the performance, then for me it's going in the right direction. Take the West Ham game, for example. We were dominant in that first half. Andreas picks up the ball exactly where he's supposed to. He looks up, he gets the ball out of his feet, he picks out Smith Rowe. Oh, look, we were in behind and we score. Like that, for me, is progress. And that is something which I like to see. And I think that's part of me is now thinking that, we're onto something, and I understand the mentality and what Marco wants from the team. But whether we can, build on that and start to see a bit more consistency in that midfield play, then we can, then I'm excited for it. And it brings a great problem that Berger comes in. Where does Lukic go? Where does Andreas go? You've got all this fantastic quality in midfield. But as long as we start seeing that going forward, I can't see him changing it. That's the long answer. But for me, as long as we can keep moving in that momentum in the right way, using Andreas and then Lukic, Berger as the sort of number 6, which allows us that flat attacking front 4 behind a striker, then suddenly we become a bit more of a force that hopefully we can start to see us pick up points and push on from there.
Sorry, the bit I don't actually understand is, notwithstanding the fact that the Burgess signing was very late, and he's going through the Marco Silva onboarding process at the moment, and Lukic is playing well to frustrate the process further, and Andreas isn't performing, but Marco's going to persist with him, and all but the haters could see how this could really work out for us if Andreas actually came off. It would be a clever reinvention of certainly the Andreas at Fulham. But if Lukic continues to do well in the 6, are we really? Is that really going to happen? That Berger never breaks through and never starts? That just doesn't seem likely to me. It just can't be part of the plan in Marco's head. He must be believing that Berger eventually, when he's come out of the other side of the onboarding process, he starts and he's a key part of our defensive midfield.
That's a great point. We're definitely not settled yet as a team, and I think there will be a little bit of chopping and changing until we find the right balance. But great point by Skibby. We must be patient through the transition. We have lost a massive part of our team in João Palhinha, and also I think Anderson's only just broke through last weekend at centre back. Last year we ended the season with Tosin, who was as we all know, the ball playing centre back. And Anderson's only just come in, replaced him. And on Saturday, we saw the benefits of that. So we just need to be a little bit patient and allow for things to develop and come together. But I suppose on the flip side of that, you don't get a lot of time. I mean, Newcastle, I think, will be our biggest test so far at home this season. Unbeaten in the league. We've got the form guide up at the moment. And yeah, they've got a great record against Fulham. We've struggled against them notoriously. I do think we owe them one, and I think it's time that we put that right. But things are going to have to click. And I think if they don't quickly on Saturday, I don't think Mark will be scared of making some quick changes. What's your feelings on Newcastle heading into this game, Skibby?
They're not the force that they were. I think they've had a bit of a sluggish start to the season, if I'm honest. I watched the Forest Cup game, and Forest were all over them. And they really struggled to sort of deal with the press. And like you say, and the results on screen, the Southampton, sort of Bournemouth, Forest, Spurs, Wolves, it's all very tight, all very narrow. They're not, running away with the game. I think as part of a fantasy football, I put Isak in. Thought he'd be an absolute monster, and he hasn't been. I think he's had opportunities, but he just hasn't been the same sort of player that I expected from last season. So I think Newcastle are a funny one. They haven't really lost many players. If anything, they've gained players with Tonali coming in from his ban, who I think is a really good player. I just think it's going to be an absolute mixed bag. I think if Newcastle play how they've started the season, then we should be able to have chances, get in behind and dictate, and have the opportunity to dictate the ball. But as I think we talked about before we went on air with the Wolves game, Harvey Barnes just picks up the ball and just scores an absolute worldie. They've got that quality. You've got Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Isak, real game-changing players. If we can keep them quiet, then I don't see why we can't, come away with the result. But it's just historically when we come against Newcastle, I think the same thing happened when we played them at St James's Park last year. Was we started the game really well. I thought we really took the game to them, and then as soon as Jimenez got red carded, absolute shift in the actual performance.
Yeah.
And the same thing at home. My cousin was in the Newcastle away end, and because I was sitting in the Putney end, we could have a chat at half time. And he was like, "Oh, you're all over us. You're going to walk away about 3-0," and we lost 1-0. And that was just absolute typical Fulham against Newcastle. And I'm not even brave enough to really speculate how this game's going to go. But I think we've got the right chance if we play how we can play. And I think the faltering Newcastle sense is something we should definitely play on. But I don't know how it's going to go.
No, it feels like another tight one. And, even as confident as I am in our defence now, without the inclusion of Anderson, they're going to be tested on Saturday like they haven't been at home so far, with the pace of Isak, Gordon and Harvey Barnes. And it does feel like another opportunity for us if we can take our chances. And that's the big question. Elton, your thoughts on your prediction, I suppose, on this one. What do you see? Do you think that we can get the win here, or another tough game?
I'm still back at your opening comments actually about this fixture, and I think you're right on the money for saying it's a really important game, because there are 3 really difficult games after this. And I suppose 2 observations here. If you look at the last 5 games for Newcastle, haven't scored a ton of goals. Our defence is, I think, probably the shining light at the moment. The one part that we are settled. If you look at it, yes, defence, midfield, and goal scoring threat, our defence is by far the most efficiently performing unit at the moment. So none of all these guys are very, very seasoned and proven Premier League professionals against the very best. I'd actually hazard a guess in saying, and so I'm okay going into this game. Not that's not underestimating or disrespecting Newcastle's attacking threat. It's high quality, very, very high quality.
Mhm.
But I think our problems lie kind of elsewhere. It's about how we find a way to score goals, not so much how we stop them scoring three. And the other big benefit is here, in that run of 4 games to come, I'd be feeling a lot more uncomfortable if this was at St James's Park at this stage of the season. We're good at home, and I think we have a way of confining even the better teams. I won't say all of them, but certainly the better teams who are in good form and are dangerous. We've got a way of actually narrowing the game and actually knowing how to play at Fulham, at
Mm.
Craven Cottage. And I think Anderson steadies that ship even more. So don't ask me to pick
I'm
the
going to press
result.
you. I'm going to press you.
Yeah,
Go on.
yeah. Uh, I yeah. Look, a 1-0 result would be
Mm,
outstanding.
mm.
But it seems, having praised our defences so highly, it seems unlikely that. Who knows? Maybe we can keep them out. That'd be a really, really good result if we can get a clean sheet against Newcastle, nick one.
For sure.
Um, Obviously, I think it seems pretty clear that perhaps through no fault of his own, Muniz probably didn't do enough last night to force Jimenez out of the starting lineup. I'm sure he'll get minutes even if Jimenez starts, but it seems pretty likely that Jimenez is gonna start.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably score a bloody hat trick and then get red carded.
And Skibby, your prediction?
I think it will be. I'm thinking about 2-1 Newcastle. I think they'll. I
Ooh.
think we're gonna lose.
Mm,
I
wow.
think it's just the way that I think Newcastle just keep squeaking results. I think it's going to be one of those games.
A tough afternoon. Yeah, I'm kind of going to go in the middle. I think it might be another draw, another 1-1 draw. Unfortunately, my heart says that we can take our opportunities and win 2-0, but my head says it could be quite similar to Saturday, a very tight, edgy game, and yeah, only a point, which would be a bit disappointing, wouldn't it? So okay. So one thing I did want to point out ahead of Saturday's game, I just saw this online before we logged in. Make sure you update your Apple Wallet, because I checked mine and the pass had disappeared from my Apple Wallet. And what you have to do is log back into your settings, and once you're in the Apple Wallet, there's you can turn it off and turn it on again, basically, so that expired passes come back up into your Apple Wallet. Go back into your Apple Wallet, press the little eye icon, and you can refresh it, really, and it will refresh to the Newcastle game. I think a lot of Apple phones are going to have this problem. What we'll do, because that was quite a jumbled explanation, we'll put a little link on our social media channels after the game with how to refresh your Apple Wallet, just so you don't have problems entering the ground. Okay, guys, anything else we want to cover before we close the pod today, Elton?
Yeah, just another thought that came to me. Not to sort of be looking too far beyond this game, but let's assume we don't drop points here, because I think a draw would be a pretty good outcome for us, to be honest. If we got a draw, I'm just wondering, if we look a little bit further ahead, whether the shackles come off somewhat. There's City, Villa, we'd expect to have really tough games, but it kind of feels like not a Marco Silva free hit, but he'd be saying, "Come on, guys, let's just go hard at these guys, see what happens, play, go out and enjoy yourselves, and really express yourselves." And maybe even the Forest away falls into that category. And I'm wondering whether there's something sort of in the wind coming up here in terms of the little run of fixtures, which may just kind of release a little bit of that stiffness in the squad, and maybe we find a little bit of fluidity.
Yeah, Skibby, any final thoughts on the game?
No, I think you're onto something there. I think the Forest one, not so much. I think that is a result that we need to make. Just because that when you look at the fixture list, they're the sort of games where you need to pick up points before you get dragged into something serious. But not saying that we will, but definitely Villa and Man City, because I don't know if you've seen, but they're actually, I think Rodri was talking about players going on strike because over the fixture list of basically just the cramming in the games. They've changed the format of the Champions League, makes it way more confusing, way more games. So a lot of them didn't play yesterday because they are still in the Carabao Cup, but they had to play Champions League. So I think their Carabao Cup is next week or something.
Yeah,
but it's all really confusing. But that fixture congestion, we're now starting to see that, and we're now going to start to see a big run of games, especially for Man City, Villa, and whoever are in the Champions League. So, that we can start using that to our advantage by having some sort of fresher players. And I mean, I'm not going to say that we're going to beat Man City, but I mean, I'd probably be over optimistic just to say that Villa would be something that we could potentially take or take the game to, but you're going to have a better opportunity now than you would, earlier on in the season or later on in the season when potentially they're not in these competitions. But it's an interesting point to sort of think about.
Yeah. Can we have a quick look at the league table, Elton, just before we finish? We obviously covered this on Monday's pod, and it is still very early to be taking too much from the league table, but
we love 12.
We do. We spent about 3
right
months
at home now.
Yeah. We were a bit lucky at the weekend. Teams below us didn't win. We talked about this on Monday and overtake us, but we need to keep these points ticking over, Elton, don't we? And win on Saturday would probably see us, break into that top half.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do love 12. I wonder if this is kind of like a slide. We should play bingo and see how many times we can actually bring this slide up unchanged. I wouldn't be that disappointed if that's where we ended up, but
no.
Hoping for more. Just as a final one before we close out, I think one of the reasons I love being involved in this podcast is, a good life is a surprising life. And who'd ever thought that you were going to get iPhone, Apple Wallet tech support advice from David Crave on the That's So Craven Fulham podcast? Whoever thought? How good?
I didn't even think that. I just thought it'd be a good reminder to people ahead of going to the game on Saturday to make sure they're not, get stuck at the turnstiles. But as I said, we'll pop a little note on the socials afterwards.
I was hoping you were about to announce £1 beers again, but I think we might have run out of that now.
Oh yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the club still do it. I suspect they won't, but we'll see. Okay, well, of course, thanks for everyone on the live stream for joining us. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to Elton, and thanks to Skibby for their input today. I think make sure you please share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, and like the podcast, because we want as many people in the Fulham community to be aware of the content that we're producing as possible. We mentioned the Discord earlier. It'd be great to get more people joining that. It's a great community that we're building there. We'll always be back later this week. We'll be back on Sunday after the Newcastle game to review that match. And hopefully maybe Jack will be back with us, which would be fantastic. And of course, Sam too. So thanks again for everyone for listening. And as always, come on, you Whites.